Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SIAM in Action. I'm your curious host, Neha. Today, we are stepping into one of the most talked about conversation of modern IT, responsible AI. There must be gazillions of conversations on this topic on the internet, but what we will talk about is service integration and management, that is SIAM's pivotal role in responsible AI. As AI is rapidly permeating into multiple facets of business in your organization, we also need to understand that this includes people as well. And more so in this agentic AI world, human and AI interoperability is key. Today's discussion will extend beyond its technical ethical implementation, necessarily deep diving into ensuring that AI is not just effective, but it is also fair, it is also transparent and accountable. We all understand and recognize the transformative power of AI, from sophisticated analytical tools to your personal assistants to code generators. They are rapidly getting created all over the world. Yet, this rapid adoption of AI unfolds against a backdrop of increasing scrutiny regarding AI's societal as well as organizational impact. While AI offers immense leverage, it also introduces a new frontier of risk that demands sophisticated governance. There are multiple examples, and one such example is AI's discrimination law, which is most talked about over the internet nowadays, against a major talent acquisition and recruitment software, which is discriminating against the applicants above age of 40. And it is not just one case. Over 85% of the enterprises, despite prioritizing it, continues to struggle with the practical adoption of responsible AI. And these instances go beyond just a small AI, which is sitting on your system, but how it is scaling across the organization and getting adopted. There are profound personal as well as legal ramifications if not ethically adopted. While we talk about these challenges and the risk, to help us dissect this complex yet critical intersection, joining us to unpack this complex subject are two insightful guests with us. First up, we have Dr. Tuuli Bell. She is a seasoned management consultant, a passionate circular economy advocate, and a founder of Tuuli Bell Limited. It's a consultancy focused on bringing joy to software sales. Imagine that. While you might know Tuuli for her work in streamlining sales cycle and fostering sustainable business practices, she's here today to share her unique perspectives on how principles of sustainable growth and ethical business can and must be applied to the development and deployment of artificial intelligence. Welcome, Tuuli.
Thank you. Great to be here today.
And we have also Chevonne Hobbs. She is a visionary who spent over 25 years helping global organizations redefine IT and service delivery. She goes beyond just IT service delivery, ensuring that the customers are able to unlock greater meaning, humanity, and possibility along with it. As a certified IT professional and a leader in ITSM and service design, Chevonne is an expert at guiding teams through AI transformations, ensuring that technology integrates effectively and responsibly. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chevonne.
Thank you, Neha. Really pleased to be here.
Okay, so directly get to the topic and the basic question here. What does responsible AI mean to you? Tuuli, would you like to go first?
Thank you. Thanks, Neha. That's a very critical question. For me, responsible AI sits at the intersection of business growth and operational resilience. And what this really means is responsible AI, it shouldn't be just seen as a cost center or something that we have to do, but we should see that as a driver for value. And what I mean by this is value through cost reduction And risk mitigation is a really big thing, as you mentioned, the lawsuit, but also there is so many different regulations, which is not just in the EU, but obviously EU is one of those leading entities for regulation, and also value creation. And I'm sure we'll touch on that later as well. How do we really focus on business growth through responsible AI?
Absolutely. Very rightly said. The cost, risk, legalities, regulations, there are a ton of things to consider. Chevonne, what does responsible AI mean to you?
For me, it's making sure that we're all following a set of principles and values. So it's understanding, what are our values as a human being, and how are we using AI responsibly within our organization, but also within our personal life. And we're following a set of principles collectively so that it doesn't bring any harm to others.
Okay, so how does these principles of responsible AI serves as, you're saying bringing structure, right? How does this serves as the roadmap for ethical AI adoption?
So for me, it's looking at some core principles, first of all. So when we're thinking about a roadmap towards responsible AI, it's actually coming together and thinking about, well, where do we begin in terms of those? And for me, there's around 6 key principles. The first one is around transparency. So it's understanding, where is this data coming from? How is this being used? It's understanding if, when you're using an AI system tool, that it's actually using AI and you're aware that it's using AI. So it's having that complete transparency around around the system. The next one is around accountability. So who's accountable for AI? And it's making sure that, it's not just a single person, but actually the people who are accountable is a collective set of people within an organization. The other ones are around beneficients, sorry, and that's really understanding that whatever's being created is being used for good. It's not being used for any negative connotations, and it's being used just and fairly. Other areas are privacy and security. So it's obviously your personal data. So when we think about facial recognition, we think about personal details and how they are being shared around. It's making sure that that information is kept secure and private. Then we've also got reliability. So how reliable are these services to us? How can we trust them? Are they safe? And trust is a really big thing, which I'm sure we'll cover as we go through this. And finally, it's around fairness. So fairness is looking at making sure that there isn't any bias in the systems against age, gender, race, nationality, any of those things. And those things are all being considered. So when we're thinking about that roadmap, we're thinking about those key principles and how they move us forward, how we create a policy around those, how they are being assessed, and how they are being consistently governed.
Great. So these are super strong 6 principles around that. And data do show that companies are maturing their responsible AI game. And as they mature their responsible AI game, they have also observed operational benefit. It included around 42% improvement in their business efficiency, as they claim, and 34% increase in customer trust. Now, this strongly suggests that structured, as you suggested there, Chevonne, structured, integrated approaches yield tangible results beyond just this risk mitigation. Now, Tuuli, given these demonstrated benefits, how can the established principles and frameworks of service integration and management be directly leveraged, not just to build, but genuinely operate a AI responsible environment for an organization?
To me, that starts with measurement. So how do we measure this operational excellence? And thank you, Chevonne, for laying out that foundation. I think that's brilliant. And you mentioned already in terms of that bias metrics or bias and kind of fairness. That's a huge part of responsible AI. And so, for example, are there specific metrics or are there specific demographics, for example, who in a SIAM world receive a lower than average service quality, for example? So so whilst AI can also have a bias within itself, but with AI, we can also discover bias that exists within the service. And I think that's just brilliant. So how do we then leverage AI to do this? Another example is energy consumption, for example. So for example, in data centers, we do have a lot of data centers because of AI, but on the other side, can we use AI to optimize the energy consumption? Can we use AI to optimize, for example, scheduling those maintenance windows, for example? So if you were using solar power, etc. So I think there's a lot of different things. And you mentioned data privacy as well, Chevonne, as a really as a key foundational part. And for that one, could we work within the SIAM network and within the SIAM function, which is really the orchestration layer? Could we work with other suppliers, other entities, and create that trust, as you said, and understanding, collaborative understanding for what is our standard of data privacy? Because it's really the weakest link which will come through as a risk within that network.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really brilliant use cases of how AI can be used for responsible AI, whether it's about operational quality, energy consumption, data privacy. Reputations of organizations are on stake. And with SIAM, we bring in governance. So, Chevonne, just going back to that governance element with you, what exactly is SIAM governance in this context of responsible AI? If you can go a little deeper on how does it specifically help to scale responsible AI within an organization?
Sure. So for this part, it's I'm going to probably go with a bit of a theme here because there's actually 6 pointers around governance as well for me. So with considering the SIAM models, we need to work with other integrators. We need to work with other suppliers and vendors to deliver services. And so what needs to happen, there needs to be a strategic alignment on the values of where we are using AI and how it's being used. And should it be used is really important, which is something Tuuli touched upon earlier, is, should we be using this or should it actually stay as a human function? So getting alignment on the strategic direction of what the supplier and the organization who are using SIAM providers is aligning on those values and then building out your principles around that. It's aligning on those principles, so the 6 that I had mentioned, but also getting clarity around the accountability of those AI system tools. So if we're using it from a vendor, it's understanding, well, actually, who is accountable if something goes wrong against our values and our principles. So it's making sure that those RACI charts are clearly articulated and the contact people are outlined. It's then making sure that once those things are embedded, we're measuring those. So how are we going to measure fairness? How is transparency being measured? How is the privacy and security elements being measured within that contract, within that agreement? So it's making sure that there's dashboards available, there's reporting available, it's understanding, what those service levels are, and then documenting those processes. So once you have your accountabilities aligned, you know what you're using and why. So almost like an assessment inventory. So it's keeping a record of all of those systems, but then documenting the processes that are being used and how they are being built, how they are being governed, and how they are being procured. So it's making sure then that there is clarity across all of those teams, all of those stakeholders on how AI is being used. I've mentioned the tools and the inventories, but then it's making sure then all of these conversations are clearly articulated in policies, but also in your contract clauses.
All right. All right. So we are talking about bringing structure. We are talking about having clarity on RACI. The measurements need to be on point when it comes to responsible AI. And you also touched about the contractual clauses should be included, right? Are there any examples that you can share on that?
It's making sure that, so in your contracts, you should always have like the set of deliverables. So the expectations of how you will be working together. So having that understanding around your AI is understanding, okay, do we list the tools in the contracts? Do we include accountability at a high level? So you can include high level accountability RACI charts in there.
Okay.
But also what's really critical is outlining your performance measurements. So what are the performance measurements that need to be in that contract? And are there any penalties against those measurements?
Lovely.
And
That's
then
really insightful. Yeah, please go
yeah,
on. Yeah.
just lastly, and then the frequency of when you report. So when we have like supplier service review board meetings, do we have those reports readily available on the system all of the time? So there is complete transparency, which is how it should be in a SIAM, or is there a need to collect that data, analyze that data, and then share that on a regular basis in service review meetings?
Yeah, so listening to that, Chevonne, if yes, we can achieve that with SIAM, it's very clear to me on how SIAM plays a foundational role across the supply chain to bring an integrated and responsible AI. It's not just critical, I think it is something that you cannot live without when you're talking about responsible AI across the supply chain. And it's not, I believe we are not just talking about the softwares, the product, or the services that we are providing. We're also talking about the talent, the skills that comes along with it, right? Around 67% of these employees currently lack the requisite trainings to adequately audit AI systems, which is a significant challenge for any organization. Tuuli, if I can pick your brain on this, what are other distinctive challenges along with this that SIAM practitioners might encounter when they are endeavoring to apply traditional SIAM governance principles to this rapidly evolving black box of AI?
Thank you. I'm going to borrow a concept which is from the triple bottom lines, which is people, profits, and planet. And that's normally how we measure value in an enlightened organization who's very much into sustainability. Now, from a people's perspective, I think Chevonne really well was going to outline what are some of those accountability and role challenges, or how can we address those. So I would like to bring that up again. So if there is an issue in terms of the output or the outcome from that AI deployment, then how can we address that accountability gap? Because there is an element of black box within that AI. So is it the service integrator? Is it the developer? Or is it the business who's responsible for that? From a planet perspective, is understanding the challenges around climate change, around carbon. So again, this is something I mentioned before. AI models do consume a lot of power, and yes, we can get this power from renewable sources, but we don't necessarily do that. And also, there is some debate in terms of what is a sustainable energy source, and then how can we consume that best. And the other one is the profits, and that's where I would bring the velocity gap challenge. So where profits is very much is hindering on the fact that we want to grow fast, but and especially now the expectation is that we'll be able to get things out a lot quicker. We can produce things a lot more with AI, but that human in the loop has still that brain from however many 10,000 years ago. So we haven't kind of upgraded necessarily our software in our brains that quickly. However, AI does develop really quickly. So how can we address that gap of there is a huge expectation for quicker outcomes, quicker profit increases and so forth, especially in the software world. But in truth, humans are still the same. We haven't really changed since November 22. So there is definitely that gap.
Absolutely. And in my brain right now, I'm sketching a 3x6 chart of people, profit, planet by the sixth principle that Chevonne explained. And for our audience, if I may request you, Tuuli, to probably pick an example where you might have worked or seen it work effectively or ineffectively, whichever use case you can bring in as an example for our audience, please.
Yeah, so I probably, given it's a SIAM audience, I would actually give an example, I think, from hardware asset management. And that's because it's easy for people to kind of visualize what hardware asset management is. So you have mobiles, you have laptops and so forth. And as an integrator, SIAM has the ability to, for example, source that from the right place and source it at the right time. And then with AI, we can do that automatically and holistically. Now, there are some challenges, and which were outlined by Chevonne as well. We have a very complex supplier network, and within those supplier networks, we might have lots of different AI models. And so where one, say the home organization, they might have an executive who has a laptop, and it's the best quality, and the AI model has picked up that that's an important way of managing assets. So making sure that they're high quality, they last a long time, we don't need to purchase very often. Now, on the other hand, a supplier's AI might have learned that actually we want really cheap stuff. It'll be cheaper to replace them rather than to restore them. And so these two AI models are now in conflict. Supplier's AI is now saying, yes, we want to sell you more stuff. We want to sell it at a lower price, but actually the home organization is now prioritizing quality. And so how do you resolve that kind of conflict? So I think that type of examples are things which more and more organizations will have to tackle. And it all comes down to that communication, that trust, that transparency that also Chevonne talks about earlier.
Oh, absolutely. And as you said, that the entire landscape is evolving so quickly. In fact, one of the Gartner forecasted that by 2026, 50% of governments globally will have enacted regulation mandated on responsible AI. Now, with that kind of mandate, and within Europe, you've already seen that, but across the globe, that is happening, and it's happening with urgency at the same time. So, if I can ask you, Chevonne, if you have to suggest some practical steps to a person who has been mandated to deploy responsible AI into multi-vendor IT services, what will be the first few immediate and practical steps they must take?
Sure. I think, well, I mean, personally, the best approach to take is to understand what your local regulations are. So obviously we've got things like the GDPR, we've got things like the EU AI Act, and as Tuuli mentioned, there are various regulations that need to be complied with across the globe. So, you've got regulations in the US, in the UK. So
Yep.
there's lots of variances. So you do need to make sure that you understand what those are, and take those into account when you're thinking about your principles as an organization. Now, Google, Microsoft, IBM, all of these large corporate companies do have a set of principles that they share. They share guidelines with others as well. So you can definitely get some really good and strong guidance from some of the large corporate organizations on how they are adopting responsible AI. When you understand what those regulations are, because obviously you don't want to be fined. Some can fine up to 35 million,
Wow.
and 7% of your revenue. So it's really important that you understand what that looks like. Having those principles and those understanding in place will then help you start to build out what your assessment checklists should be for if you're an organization that builds AI, or you are deploying it, so you're using it, or if you're buying AI systems, it's really important that you have an assessment checklist created, which includes all of these types of compliances, regulations, legislations. It includes your principles that aligns to your company values. And you've shared these with the key stakeholders within your SIAM model. So then that ensures then that accountability around this is absolutely crystal clear. And then carrying out that inventory, so making sure that you've got a whole list of all of these things. And just as you were saying about, the people, process, and planet there, Tuuli, it's making sure that you're capturing all of those aspects within your assessment so that there is no risk or very limited risk to your company, and how you're going to measure those. How are you going to make sure that that is being audited and your organization is compliant against these assessments? And how is that being presented back to the company in a dashboard or reporting form? And then just a final comment there, Neha, is just to make sure that everything is either, it's documented in a policy and it is in your contracts, just to protect yourselves. But absolutely, the first step is understand what those regulations are and
Yep.
start building out your assessment criteria to make sure that from a beneficient's perspective, everything that is coming into your organization is transparent, it is fair, and it is private, it's secure, it's safe to use, and there is accountability being held.
Absolutely right. That's such clear thought process on how to get started. And while we start with that, even the data keeps drifting, the risk keeps increasing, the regulations keep changing. Now,
Yes.
with all these evolving at the same time and many unknowns that we will deal with in this AI black box, how do we foresee SIAM to continuously evolve and get adapted even for the future and ensure that it is intrinsically woven into this fabric of enterprise operations to not just secure and ensure that we are doing performing ethical AI today, but in future also, SIAM evolves to keep us protected, to keep things transparent, to keep the accountability, as you said, Chevonne, and to ensure that everything is running fair.
Mm-hmm.
Tuuli, would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you. So I see SIAM as currently as very much an orchestrator and being the brain of operations. Now, the new world of SIAM, I think, will very much focus on the heart. How being that operational conscience of the organization. And because of AI in a knowledge world or kind of knowledge processing organizations, and for a knowledge worker, we can save a lot of time. So that time that we've saved, if we can shift that to innovation, human innovation, and let AI work on the kind of manual tasks and the orchestrative task, which humans would have done in the past and to an extent still do. So when we can release that human innovation and that humanness into organizations, into the SIAM function, I think that's really the future of AI, of the future of SIAM combined
Wow.
with AI. So yeah.
So you're bringing some brilliant points, and I'm looking forward to how this will evolve, right? Bringing the focus into the heart, into the conscious, and not just the implementation. Bringing humanness in every implementation. Big concept, huge concepts on how this will be achieved. Um, and I do not think so. One episode of a podcast would do justice to unfold all such huge topic and all the aspects of this topic, right? And for the audience, so far, I think we have had brilliant discussion and very practical tips of while we are dealing with technical implementation of AI, following those 6 pillars of responsible AI, how does service integration and management continues to bring focus, the humanness in implementing responsible AI. This conversation so far has been truly insightful with all the 6 S's that you brought in, Chevonne, and the 3 principles, Tuuli, of looking not just as at AI from a technical implementation perspective, but think it thoroughly from people, planet, and profit perspective. And all of these coming together, your practical Chevonnes have been extremely helpful, keeping things structured, creating assessments, updating assessments, and not just do it humanly, right? Bring AI agents to do that for you. With all of these coming together, I believe it's extremely important for us to understand that the principle of transparency, accountability, privacy, security, safety, fairness. It's not just for technology and the data behind it. It is, again, I'm repeating that, it is for people, profit, as well as for planet. Now, this concept of people, profit, and planet is a huge topic. The elements that you are bringing in here, Tuuli, is humanness in implementation, humanness in adoption of technology. That's a huge concept on its own. I do not think so an episode would do justice to it. I'm sure we should have several conversations around it and more often than now. If for our audience, we have to look at this bigger picture, and there is one core principle of responsible AI that SIAM is uniquely positioned to champion in a multi-vendor world, what would it be and why?
So to me, that's systemic accountability. And one of the reasons SIAM is so good at this is because it brings everything and everyone together. It's really that transparent, that orchestration layer, as we've mentioned before. And also it's how do we focus on not just delivering great service, as we are very much doing now, but how do we ensure that it's also doing good for the people, profits, and planet? And so that's really where I would see SIAM as a very much a key enabler at this point.
Great. So, and what's your ultimate call to action for our listeners?
So, ultimate call is really to have that initial conversation within your team, within your immediate team, and within your immediate managers, and start that conversation, because I think sustainability, responsible AI, SIAM, I think there's both a bottom up and a top down approach is what's needed, and it's when you can bring that humanness and that open conversation, I think that's really the great start you can make.
Brilliant, and truly embrace the SIAM as an enabler for ethical and trustworthy AI, right? Chevonne, what would you suggest is the ultimate call of action for listeners?
For me, it's don't see responsible AI as a separate, overwhelming burden. Bring this
So
into
true.
your exactly, and bringing this into like your operational excellence, leveraging the SIAM that you have to bring order, control, and the efficiencies around those complex IT services that bridge the use of AI. And ethical AI is just non-negotiable.
Mhm.
It has to be in there. It has to be included, and using what you have and leveraging what you have to enhance the things like I've mentioned around like the principles, what Tuuli mentioned as well around people, profit, and planet. It's
Mhm.
making sure that you're mitigating those risks to your organization with making sure you understand what regulations and assessments are needing to be in place and engaging across cross-functional teams, speaking to all of those stakeholders and identifying those key people who need to be engaged. And those stakeholders should be not just your AI team or
Mhm.
your ethical AI contact within your company, but it do include security, include HR, include your legal teams, include all of those key functions in your business to come together and consider those principles, those assessments, and those regulations that must be complied with.
Absolutely. It has to be holistic. Thank you so much, Chevonne. Anthony, this discussion has been incredibly invaluable in terms of thinking big, thinking immediate, thinking tactical as well. So the discussion has made it extremely clear to me, and I believe to the audience as well, on how SIAM is pivotal for us to keep navigating through this transformation of AI. Well, having said that, that brings us to the end of today's episode. And I hope our audience have significantly gained deeper understanding of service integration and management, playing a crucial role in responsible AI. Having said that, if you want to catch up on any of our previous episode, whether it was for the business model or for sustainability with AI, or with service integration and management, please feel free to go through the previous episodes. And for the next one, we will be discussing modern operating model for service integration and management. So don't forget to join us on Scopism community to keep getting all the alerts about the next episode and the insights from the previous one. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day ahead.